We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today.
He's got to make plays, and the linebacker group has got to play better.
This was not a comfortable game by any stretch of the imagination. He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. It is quarterback Justin Fields. I think this is kind of an interesting spot for him to be drafted.
There has never been a situation quite like this before.
At midcourt, inside it, at the buzzer, got it!
Selection Sunday is finally here. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy, but I don't think he can be the guy. It's obvious that he's got this opportunity.
This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.
They really enjoyed it, and you can tell there's just kind of a new aura about the defense. Really, it's like they're really out there having fun and really want to just hit somebody. So I think that, you know, from what we were able to see so far, even though they were playing a basic defense, I thought that, you know, you're already seeing those small little improvements that are a good sign for this fall.
I think we had an audio glitch there at the beginning, so I apologize for that, but we are back and we're rolling here. So the 2022 spring game was a success. I know we caught the second half of what you said there about the defense kind of, you know, getting their feet underneath them with Jim Knowles and frankly, you know, a system that's going to take a little while to implement. But especially the younger guys today, I thought really flashed nicely. Why don't we go on that direction here? Kai Stokes, holy smokes, did he play well? Jordan Hancock had a great day. Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau. I thought Denzel Burke had a really nice pass breakup in the end zone. It's nice to watch, again, a glorified scrimmage, but it's nice to watch a spring game where the defense is making some plays that open your eyes, because last year that was the problem.
Yeah, and it's really cool to see Kai Stokes come in and make an immediate impact. You obviously know with him losing his black stripe that, you know, he's impressing the coaches and stuff. But even if you go back to his recruitment, you know, Ohio State offered him and then he committed 5 days later. You know, he got a slew of offers after that. And, you know, Alabama, Georgia, all those schools threw their hats in the ring. And it really didn't matter because they all saw what he brings to the table. And, you know, he was out there proving it today.
How about on the offensive side? You know, anytime CJ Stroud goes out and competes, given what he did last year, he's going to open eyes. And I don't want to go down the story or go down the road that it's the same story year after year. But Ohio State has gotten such high-level quarterback play these last few years. To see him go out there and play with confidence and look in control, and to see an offense that, you know, frankly was clicking for a little while there early on. When some of the regulars were getting consistent minutes. I just thought it was kind of fun to see the fact that, look, we're 3 months removed from the Rose Bowl, and I know we're 5 months to September 3rd, but this offense has a chance, I think, to be, again, one of the elite offenses in college football.
Really, and if you think about it, this, I believe, is the first time that Ryan Day is coming back since he's been the head coach with a second-year quarterback to a spring game. So, I mean, I know that Justin Fields' second year obviously got canceled because of the pandemic, but, you know, you kind of see, like you had mentioned, that just Stroud's comfortability within the offense and just how he carries himself. And if you look back to last year, obviously, you know, they were trying to figure out who was going to be the starter. You know, that was really a situation where he kind of took that next step, and you thought, you know, maybe it was him or Kyle McCord, and then, you know, that got into the fall. But for him to sit here and come in today and just look really comfortable is a good sign. And, you know, it just really talks about, you know, the progression that he's made over the last year and where he is going to continue to go.
Spring games give us a chance to see some depth. And so while we've talked about CJ ad nauseum for good reason, I liked what I saw from Kyle and from Devin Brown today. Devin Brown, I thought, showed a really impressive bit of arm strength when he needed it, but I think I was more impressed with his ability to take things off of throws when it was required to just touch it into not quite as tight a window.
Yeah.
For being a young guy, he's got a pretty good feel.
And I kind of like the mobility that he brings to the game as well. I mean, he seems a little bit more, apt to tuck the ball. And I think, maybe part of that might be just he's so young and he doesn't necessarily know to go through the progressions like a veteran established quarterback would, or even Kyle McCord in his second year, just being more comfortable with the offense. But it was kind of like that little dynamic that you might maybe think that once it's his time to battle Kyle McCord for the starting job, that might be something that might give him an edge in that aspect.
It'll be really interesting to see what happens a year from now for sure. And again, knock on wood, you never hope for anybody to get injured. And so you hope that this is not a issue for the Buckeyes this year. You've got your established guy in CJ, who was a Heisman finalist. And I mean, gosh, after he basically took the Akron game off to get his shoulder healthy, I thought he was the best player in college football from that point on. He didn't win the Heisman Trophy, but perhaps, the first couple of the games of the year where he was still getting his feet underneath him maybe prevented that from happening. But it was obvious Ohio State had the guy they wanted to roll with, and that worked out pretty darn well for the Buckeyes. They obviously finished on a high note. So the expectations continue to be there. If you watch the spring game, Trevion Henderson only got a few touches early on, and they basically said, okay, you're done for the day. There's no reason for him to keep going. Depth at running back is one of the key, components to this year's team. What do they have and what do they need to develop? Mayan Williams ran well, and frankly, Evan Pryor was a star today.
Yeah, and I mean, Mayan Williams, like you said, he really impressed me today. Just, he's kind of, the bowling ball nickname is appropriate because he keeps churning and keeps going and is going to make a very big impact on this offense this year. But then Evan Pryor, obviously, both in the passing game and in the running game, was a player who they're going to be able to count on this year. Ryan Day said it in his post-game press conference that, they're going to make sure that he is in a position to make an impact. And, I think it's one of those things. He sat last year, kind of learned, and he's kind of come into this spring with a chip on his shoulder. He mentioned, he's not just someone who's going to tuck his tail and run and go find a position that he's going to, be able to start right away or anything like that. He's going to earn it. And I think that we're starting to see him do that, today.
How about on the offensive line? I mean, Ryan Day made it pretty clear this week that there were probably two areas that he needed to see, more depth from. He said he felt like they've got 6 or 7 offensive linemen right now. They need to have more like 8 or 9 going into the season. They like the guys they have that they think they're going to be the starting 5, but you don't have only 5 guys playing offensive line all year. We've certainly seen how that can be, a bit of a kryptonite at times the last couple of years. And I'm even thinking back to when Harry Miller was forced to play center 2 years ago at Michigan State and how troublesome that was. So you've got to have some depth. And then look, in the secondary, I think they like the pieces they have, but didn't really know how those all fit together. They've still got 5 months to figure it out. But in particular, a lot of those defensive backs today were among, in my opinion, the best players on the field.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned Harry Miller today. He was obviously out there with his teammates after, an offseason that was very difficult, or even, the last year really for him. And it was nice. I briefly spoke with him and he had a smile on his face. So I just kind of wanted to point that out and let everybody know that, from what I saw, he seems to be doing good. But beyond that, it was really you were able to tell that, in the second half with just the lack of depth that they had along the offensive line, because really the defensive ends and even the defensive tackles were kind of pinning their ears back and saying, hey, we're going to be able to beat these guys because they don't have the experience or just, the overall depth of that position. And I think it's very important that, they had, 16 guys out today and a number of them are offensive linemen. They're going to be getting offensive linemen, the signees that are going to be coming in over the summer. So, there are the bodies there. It's just a matter of, they're only going to have a month before the season starts to really get in, really get into that position.
Well, and the reality is they're playing such a big name opponent, but such an important game, literally week 1. There is no ramp up. I mean, even last year, at least they didn't play Oregon week 1, right? I mean, you're playing your biggest non-conference game of the year, which can, at the end of things, really help push you over the threshold or potentially hold you back from the college football playoff. Ohio State was in position last year that, they had to win out in order to get to the playoff, and obviously that didn't happen. Had they beaten Oregon and still lost to Michigan and not made the conference championship game, perhaps they could have still been in the college football playoff. Still might have been a long shot, but it would have been a better argument than if they had lost early in the year the way they did. Notre Dame is a program that is, obviously going through a coaching change, but they've got a lot of the same culture because they've got Marcus Freeman still on staff. I think Notre Dame had a great recruiting season, and Ohio State fans certainly know some of the guys that are now coaching there with Al Washington, heading over, and with James Laurinaitis now being on their staff. The toughness that staff is going to bring, that defensive mindset that Marcus Freeman is going to bring. I mean, Ohio State has to be ready to rock week one. And for as important as these last few months were, installing a new defense and trying to keep this momentum going offensively, the next 5 months, I think it has to just be a continuation of where they were these last three.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really get to see that defense today. Obviously, they kept it very basic. And I think just there's been so much focus on the fundamentals because doing things the right way are going to lead you to kind of, not thinking about it as much. And then, it then translates onto the field. And I think you made a great point about just kind of the toughness that Notre Dame is going to bring. This isn't a team that, is going to be easily walked over or anything. I mean, Notre Dame made the playoffs 2 years ago. So it's not like it's just a name only kind of team. I mean, they're going to get Notre Dame's best. And, I think it's just a matter of, like I said, focusing on the fundamentals for the next couple months. Once you get onto, because they did install the defense. It's not as if they just kind of haven't gotten to that point yet. So it's just a matter of, over the summer looking at it, saying this is how we continue to improve upon it. And then come, fall camp, let's hit the ground and go.
What'd you make of the decision today to tackle to the ground most of this game?
Yeah, I mean, I like it from a standpoint of it. I mean, that's real football. It's, you're not worried about just two-hand tapping. And I mean, obviously, plays are able to develop a little bit more. You're able to see exactly what that toughness is, because instead of just somebody coming in and wrapping up Mayan Williams, he's going to run that person over. And he's kind of, laying that foundation to say, hey, let's carry this into the rest of the season and through the summer, into the fall camp, into the season, and so forth. So, I'm all for it. That's one thing that, Ryan Day even admits, they did lack physicality in their losses last year. It wasn't a thing that plagued them all the time, but I think that if you just instill it into their minds, very early on and say, hey, this is how we're going to do things, it just, you build it from there.
Yeah, I think he was trying not to call too much attention to that. And I think he did it in kind of an artful way and saying there were some moments last year we were really physical and things were really good. And then there were some moments where it was lacking, and it was lacking most prominently in those two losses. There's going to be things that are obviously only said behind closed doors, but I have to imagine that it was the idea of putting that physicality and that toughness at the top of the priority list. To me, that, he didn't want to use the word symbolic, but to me, that's kind of what that was. Yeah. Tommy Zagorski not joining us today. I know many of you know Coach from a lot of our conversations throughout the year last year, and he made a comment to me earlier that really stood out. He said, I've been a part of a lot of staffs that when a new defensive coordinator comes in and you're the head coach who just brought him on, a lot of times that question for you is, what do you need? What does this group need for you to accomplish what you and I agreed upon trying to accomplish? And Z laughed and he goes, I don't know a defensive coach in America that would say, no, we don't need to tackle today. And so there's probably, there's probably simply some of that went in as well. I'm sure these last few months have been kind of a whirlwind for the staff with all the recruiting that goes on this time of year. And install is obviously top of mind. But I thought it showed today so far that it's off to a good start.
Yeah, and Dade kind of talked about that on Thursday during his press conference, and he said that Knowles was on board for it, and I was like, well of course he is.
I think he's leading the charge.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just very difficult for them to hear and or maybe read or whatever the headlines that they've seen after that loss to Michigan. Josh Gaddis, who's now at Miami, so they don't really have a chance to kind of get back at him for this, but he was out there leading the charge saying, hey, they weren't as physical as we were, And that's just something that's going to continue. And I mean, that doesn't sit right here. So, as much as they don't want to talk about it, that's obviously going to be at the top of the priority chart. And, they're going to be the most physical team come, November 26th, because that's just what they're, building toward at this point.
That's the DNA for sure. We're heading into a time of the year now where the team is going to be doing a lot more individual work over the summer. Where is your attention as you look at this team? Where is your attention in terms of growth that you need to continue to see based on where we ended last year and what you saw today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really goes back to the secondary just because of the struggles that they've had over the last 2 years. And I know Kerry Combs was that was kind of his forte was the defensive backs, and it just didn't work out that way. I mean, if you just look at how Ohio State was the last 2 years, statistically the 2 worst defenses in Ohio State history. So, you're coming off of that. And even if they're a middle of the pack defense this year, it's still an improvement over last year. I mean, that's not what you're paying Jim Knowles millions of dollars to do. But, you put a top 30 defense out on that field along with this offense, which is arguably, if not the best offense in college football, then you're going to win a national championship with that.
I got my favorite text in overreaction April. I got a text in the first quarter of the game today that said something to the effect of, boy, I'd hate to be a defensive coordinator that's trying to, game plan for these guys. I don't know how in the world this team is going to lose a game this year. I just started laughing and thinking to myself, it's nice to have the kind of depth that Ohio State has offensively and what they've shown at skill positions the last couple of years, because there are going to be some games that you're going to win simply because you're more talented than the other team. And that's not a knock against any of the Big Ten teams, because I think the floor of the Big Ten has risen certainly the last few years. Look at somebody like Rutgers. They went from being atrocious to pretty darn competitive. But the reality is that Ohio State's been able to reload, and they have some of the premier skill position players in the country that kind of showcases itself. Certainly the last few years at quarterback, at running back, at receiver. I think in the next couple weeks, you're going to see Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson drafted, if not in the first round, pretty high in the second round too. This team's going to win games, and they're going to build confidence early in the year. So it is fun to see messages like that from fans who automatically start thinking, God, I can't wait for September 3rd.
Yeah, I mean, and like you kind of hinted at, there's 4 games on the schedule that are all home games that are all going to be very physical. You got Notre Dame, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And really, if you look at it from a Big Ten standpoint, those are probably 3 of the top 3 most physical teams outside of, if you take Ohio State out of the equation in the Big Ten, just based upon their playing style. They're going to try to run down Ohio State's throat. And I think if, you really have to establish that physicality right now and just continue to build upon it.
Any big plans for the summertime?
Yeah, I'm going to go to Yosemite. So
sweet.
I'm pretty excited for that one.
Gotta find a way to unplug a little bit, get out to the national parks and have some fun.
Go live in a van down by the river.
Or out in the middle of nowhere. That sounds
What
good.
about you?
We're gonna have some fun. I'm certainly gonna play some golf. If you follow me on Twitter, you know that I find myself on a golf course once in a while. Although,
how do you do?
I'm well enough to have fun, not well enough to have any aspirations to play beyond just go out and have a good time.
My clubs always end up in the water. That's not.
I don't do that. We're good on that front. So no, I'll be watching lots of baseball this summer and gearing up for what we hope is going to be a fun fall here in Columbus. Looking forward to that very much.
Be here before we know it. That's for sure.
It's crazy how fast that always happens. You think about, today is what, April 16th?
Mm-hmm.
We're 100 days removed from Pasadena. And that feels like an awfully long time ago. 100 days is a long time, but it really isn't that long ago.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And I'm pretty sure on Big Ten Network earlier today, before they went to the spring game, they were showing basically the highlights and the rerun of this year's Rose Bowl. This team, I think, is going to have, in some ways, a very similar flavor in 22 than they did in 21. But I'm looking forward to seeing the nuances and the differences, because no team is exactly the same. And the reality is, even on the offense that set all these records again last year, they're going to have 5 new starters. Jeremy Ruckert's gone. You got Petit Frere and Munford on the offensive line that are both, not back, even though you're backfilling them with guys that have played a lot. And obviously we've mentioned again that Wilson and Olave are headed to the NFL as well. But gosh, after what Marvin Harrison Jr. did in that Rose Bowl, and with the flashes of brilliance we've seen from Emeka Egbuka. Oh, by the way, Jackson Smith-Njigba's coming back. Maybe today we got a better glimpse of what this running back room could look like. I saw a good play today from Cade Stover. G. Scott caught a bunch of passes and was really involved in the offense today. They made a comment they really like Joe Royer and Mitch Rossi. Maybe the tight end room is getting a little bit deeper than it was last year. Should be a lot of fun, and hope CJ Stroud plays all year and stays healthy. But if for some reason, if he can't play at times, or if hopefully games are blowouts and backups get opportunities, I thought Kyle McCord looked good today. But Devin Brown, for being a first-year guy, played with some confidence. Yep. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think the thing that really stood out to me too was just even players that you haven't really heard of. I know Cameron Kittle, defensive back, walk-on, came in and had an interception, and he kind of reminds me a lot of Chris Booker last year. It's that name that you haven't really quite heard of, but it's somebody to pay attention to because he's going to have an impact on special teams this year. He had Reese Stocksdale, he caught a touchdown pass today, so those are guys that they might not get all of the attention, but these are the games that you're going to remember them for, and then that's going to carry over into the fall, and they're going to have an impact that way.
I want to close with a Dwayne Haskins note. Gosh, what an incredible moment in the stadium today. Basically, at the end of the first half, the team sort of gathered in the middle of the field, and the team, along with 60,000 plus, looked up at the video board and watched a really nice video tribute to Dwayne. His initials, were down painted on the field, down in the I guess that's the southeast corner of the field. You get the impression that there's still some pretty heavy hearts, and for good reason, because Dwayne meant so much to this program. Man, I've watched Ohio State football for a long time, and I don't know if I've ever really seen a moment that was as emotional as that one.
Yeah, it was a difficult moment. I know that the last week has just been very difficult for anybody who knew Dwayne. I know him briefly, but I don't know him on the same level as many of these people who we cover. And I just know that they obviously played today with very heavy hearts. And you mentioned just kind of the impact he made. I grew up watching Troy Smith, and Terrell Pryor and Braxton Miller and those guys, and then JT Barrett comes along, and he might be maybe the most accomplished quarterback in Ohio State history, but I don't think that anybody has ever made really the same impact as Dwayne did, just because of we see CJ Stroud standing behind us, he was standing behind us up there. He's not here without Dwayne Haskins. Justin Fields doesn't come to Columbus without Dwayne Haskins and what he did in 2018. And I think that, it might not just be something that you remember that season. I mean, it was a tremendous season that ended with a Rose Bowl victory through 50 touchdown passes. It's only one of 6 players ever to do it. And I remember watching Colt Brennan from Hawaii throw 50 touchdowns. And I just I don't believe anybody from Ohio State will ever do that. You literally saw Craig Krenzel throw 16 touchdown passes on the way to the national championship. And Dwayne Haskins really changed that position. And I think that it's just going to continue and it really just speaks to his ability and just how he changed things here.
Yeah, and I think some of that too is the influence of Ryan Day offensively, because ever since Ryan Day has come to Columbus, this team has averaged at least 500 yards of total offense per game every year. And I'm pretty sure they had only done that a couple of times in the entire history of Ohio State football prior to his arrival. Some of it is the way the game is changing in general. But, to your point, I mean, there has never been a quarterback that was as eye-popping and dominant a player as Dwayne Haskins. He really did.
Yeah.
Had a great arm, and maybe it was just so much fun for Ohio State fans to see something different, because God, for as awesome as JT Barrett was and is, I don't know how many people ever watched him and thought no, this guy at the next level, he's going to be the real deal. I don't know that there was a whole lot of that, but I do think that even though his time in Columbus on the field was fairly brief for Dwayne, there were people that looked at his arm and looked at the way he played in an offensive system that was so different, that made you believe that, he was going to be the next great quarterback in the NFL. And I know things were, a little frustrating for him But by all reports, he was turning the corner and excited about his opportunity in Pittsburgh to compete there. It's just an awful, awful tragedy. And I thought Buckeye Nation did a really good job of honoring him, both with that vigil earlier last week and then at the game today.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that just really is the hardest part about all of it is that he was in a great position. Obviously, death is just such a hard thing in the first place. But he really seemed to be in a position, just personally and professionally, where he was going to take that next step. And you were like, Dwayne Haskins, NFL starter, Dwayne Haskins, guy who's giving back to his community, like those kind of things. And, to be 24 years old and not have him with us anymore, that's obviously a terrible thing. But
Ohio State I think did a really nice job of, remembering his legacy and honoring his memory in an appropriate way this afternoon. It was a great moment. So that'll wrap up our coverage of spring football. It's obviously been a whirlwind of a spring. There's been a lot going on, and there still is a lot to come, especially on the recruiting trail. There were a number of really highly recruited guys that were on campus today, including a couple of the top quarterbacks anywhere in high school football across the country here today.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, I was going to say there's more to come on that front, both at quarterback and other positions as well. That recruiting trail never really stops. There's still plenty of news coming here over the summertime. But in the meantime, we appreciate you making Buckeyes Now a hotspot for your Ohio State football coverage this spring. We are really, really excited for a fun fall. Obviously, this time of year, everybody's optimistic, and it's cool when you think you've really got a reason to be, because this team has an awfully high ceiling. Anytime you see C.J. Stroud take the field and throw the ball like that, you feel like you got a chance to win every game, and maybe this year they can do that.
Say, just be thankful you get to watch him for about 14 more games, because it's not going to be any longer than that.
I can't imagine it would be. For Andrew Lind, I'm Brendan Gulick. Again, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at BuckeyesNow SI. We'd really appreciate if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel. We want to be able to do content like this for you after each game, and certainly throughout the weeks, building up to games to give you the best Ohio State coverage that we can. And all the latest news and information is available over on BuckeyesNow.com. We'll see you soon. Enjoy the rest of your spring. We'll talk to you soon on Buckeyes Now.